Hello and welcome to the fourth video in my Smash VAT series, and I am super excited for today. When I first started this series, the first name that popped into my head was Sally Farrant. She's the one that has definitely made it very clear that this is something that she helps business owners with, so I'm super excited to be having her on today. So Sally, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sally. I am an accountant by background, so I know my way around this stuff. And I've worked in corporates for years and years and years. And then about 5 years ago, I decided to set up my own business. And now I help small businesses with their numbers because lots of people don't really get their numbers. And VAT has become one of those things, along with things like pricing and stuff like that.
Cool. No, and you're right. Lots of people are really scared of the numbers. They hide from the numbers. They ignore the numbers. And the reality is, as a business owner, we can't do that. Numbers are part and parcel. And so part of this series is really to try and help people to gain a bit more confidence to be numbers aren't scary, because they're not. They're definitely not scary. So obviously, as you said, you had a background as an accountant, and one of the things I think is really important, and we've discussed it already a bit, is this idea about that, yes, the accountant does so much for your business, but they look after them normally for some people, just the compliance side. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to help you as a business owner with some of the other aspects that might be involved. So could you just tell us a little bit about, I suppose, obviously accountants do vary, but what you would say a traditional accountant might do, and some of the gaps you might need to either find other support for example, I know that's some of the stuff that you do with people, in order to really make sure that you are ready to go VAT and it's not a disaster.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, what it's remembering is actually knowing what you're paying your accountant for. And most of the time you are paying them for the compliance side of the business. So you're paying them to make sure that your taxes are paid on time. You are paying them to make sure that, all your personal stuff is done. You're not, and your accounts are submitted on time. You are not paying them to manage your business. So they often don't know your business very well. They will tell you, oh, you've made the 85,000 threshold for the VAT, but they'll tell you that when you've got 30 days to register. And they might tell you that if you're lucky. Yeah. Whereas actually what you need is somebody to go, right, okay, well, it looks like I'm heading for that in the next 6-12 months, because actually you need to start looking at really carefully about how that actually will impact your business. If you work mostly with big businesses, it may not affect you at all. You may just be able to go, do you know what, sales side, I can just add this VAT on and we're done. Very easy. But if you're selling to tiny businesses, that could mean putting up your prices 20% if you don't plan for it. That's a huge thing. But also you've got costs on the other side. So you might be sat there going, well, actually, I pay for loads of costs that have got VAT. I work with a wedding events company. They have to hire the venues. They're all VATable. So they can claim quite a lot of VAT back on their supplier side. So actually the impact for them is not 20%. So they don't need to worry so much about putting their price up. They might put them up 5 or 10%, depending on how you calculate it, but it might not impact you by 20%. So it's really looking, your accountant will tell you when it's happening, but it's trying to go, actually, do you know what? This looks like it's something I'm heading for. The sooner you can see it's something you're heading for, the better. Because actually putting up your prices a little bit at a time might be one way of doing it, rather than going, oh, I'm now 20% more expensive, and looking at whether you actually need to put it up 20% or whether realistically, it doesn't work like that and you're going to only need to put them up 5 to 10% or not at all. If your business, like I say, business to big business, you just say, well, now I'm VAT registered, and you just add VAT and they don't care. So it totally depends on your business and market.
I'm going to be a bit of a devil advocate, because I actually saw quite an interesting post recently with a business owner that clearly did some businesses that were were below the VAT threshold and some that were over, and they had quite a weird one that was clearly they were absorbing the VAT if you were a non-VAT registered business. And so if you're someone that's right on that border, let's say you're the perfect mathematics, 50% of them are going to be your clients are registered, 50 are not. What would your sort of mindset be around how to approach that? Because I think when you're one way or the other, then it's a little bit easier. But if you're on this tread line.
Yeah, so I think part of it is thinking about, what you need it to be. What do you need your actual money to be in your business? How much do you actually need to be taking home? You need to treat all customers the same. Yeah. Because once you're VAT registered, you've obviously got to do that. And actually, a lot of the time, when you're dealing with small business, they want to know what the price is, including all the VAT. And if you're dealing with bigger businesses, they don't. So it's kind of going, the price is the price, and you decide what that's going to be, excluding VAT, and then just add the VAT on. And so you might talk to customers about, you know, that being the total price, or you might talk to more corporate customers about, well, it's this plus VAT.
Yeah.
I think it's just going, you know what, some customers it will be a good thing and some it will be a bad thing, and making a decision. And this is what I mean about the planning of it, is kind of going, right, okay, well, if it's half, if I was to put all my prices up 10%, that'll probably just about balance it all out for me. But you can only know that if you sit down and go, okay, that's fine. And you might go, well, look, actually, do you know what? I know it's going to be happening in 6 months' time. If I put my price up 5% now, I'll be making more money now. And then when I have to go VAT registered, I might not be able to put them up for 6 months, but then I've already got some extra further back. It's tricky because I think people go, oh, I've got to give money to the VAT man, and all of the, you know, you've got to give money back to my scene, and nobody wants to do that. But it is kind of going, it is just something you slightly painfully just have to go through.
Yeah.
It's a bit like becoming a limited company or setting yourself up as a sole trader. It's kind of a bit of those, oh, it's a bit of an admin job. But actually, once you've done it and you're in it, you stop thinking about the fact that you've got to do
and I'm really glad you spoke about that, because I think that's one of the things, like the VAT threshold is like different in different countries. And actually, when I've been having some conversations with some people that are saying, like, actually we have it at an amount, which is why, like, I'm talking about it, because there are a load of people that are purposely holding themselves back because they still can have, you know, a 6k month, like they can get 70k a year, and they're like, actually I'm pretty happy to sit underneath that. Whereas in other countries where it's really low, everyone has to suck it up straight away. It's just like, I've got a business, that's part of living a business. Whereas I think we've got that threshold just at that enough amount that some people are like, nah, I can just sit underneath it.
And I think if you are working for yourself and it's just you and it's your time and you're mostly kind of sort of, you're basically freelancing, so you've kind of got, you know, jobs, then you can kind of go, actually, you know, yes, I might decide that I would be actively underneath, but I think it's going, that's what I want to earn, not I'm going to keep myself under the, I'm happy with earning 70,000. In the UK, 70,000 would be quite well under the threshold. And you'd be like, well, I'm happy with earning that amount. But I think I do know lots and lots of people who say, oh, well, I turned down that client because it was going to be a big client. And it would, particularly if you get like a 1 month where you maybe get a 10k client, you know, you get a big amount of money in 1 or 2 months, you know, because VAT, remember, is a rolling 12 months. It's not your calendar, it's not the calendar year, it's not your tax year, it's not any of those. It's the last 12 months looking backwards. So if you get really big peaks and troughs in your business, you could end up going over the VAT threshold without kind of realizing. But yeah, I think it's kind of going, I'm not doing this because I don't want to go over the VAT threshold. You know, I think if you're going up over the VAT threshold, you should be a limited company. You're already paying your accountant to do that kind of compliance work. Most accountants will take on doing your VAT just like they do your payroll and your accounts, like that. And you just want somebody to process it. And these days, you know, you've got to have an accounting system. You know, you've got to have Xero, you've got to have QuickBooks. And again, you've got to have a system where you can file that electronically now. You can't file VAT manually. And it's done, so if you've got a bookkeeper, they're doing it for you. So I think it is a real mindset block, though, that you kind of go, I don't want to earn that much because it's a bit of a pain. But if you're getting up to that 85%, you know, you're already a kind of reasonably serious, reasonable sized business. And actually it's kind of going, but you also want to be going, right, okay, well, if I'm going over 85, I need to be aiming at kind of 100. And that's where you want to be going with it, is kind of going, I don't want to, you don't want to get stuck. If you can avoid it, you don't want to get stuck around 85, because you don't want to keep going all backwards and forwards, because you can deregister, but it's a pain. You don't want to keep having to do that. You don't want to be hovering around that, I don't think.
No, and I think I agree, that idea of, if you're going to go through it, you've got to have that confidence that you're going to go through it and keep going, and be like, this is now like a decision. And then you still have that capacity in the business that, it's not, I can imagine, I hadn't really thought about that idea of when someone has, like, they might just get one big client that, like, can give them those few peak months. And if you then don't think you're going to get more clients like that, that can be probably quite a hard decision. Like, I think it then has to be like, right, this is going to be it basically becomes your new normal. You're like, these are the type of clients I work with now, this is the type of work I'm doing, and then that means you can go through and feel confident that you're going to stay up through it.
Yeah, and I think it's remembering that actually the reality is that people often think that you are a more professional business. This is not true, by the way, but there is a thought that you look like a more professional business if you're VAT registered. There are plenty of people where I buy something from and they look like massive coaches, or they look like, you think, oh, this is they're a big deal. And then you get the invoice through and it's got VAT on it, and you're like, oh. So there is definitely like a bit of that. And if people are VAT registered, they're doing quite well, even if they're, even if you volunteer to do so. So I think it's, I do think that some companies, particularly if you work with bigger companies, do view it well that you are VAT registered and that you're a well-established business if you're VAT registered. So I think it's kind of not always thinking this is an awful thing, but making sure you've got things in place that somebody can do that work for you. And it's having that plan in place, which is the bit your accountant may or may not do, which is going, right, how is this actually going to impact my business? Don't worry about anybody else. And what will I need to do in the next, preferably 6 to 12 months, to make sure that I'm ready for when this happens? Because you only have 30 days to register once you hit the threshold.
Okay, so if your accountant doesn't do that, we're going to be worst case scenario. If you've got a proper, strict, normal compliance accountant, what would your advice be then? What an actual business owner should be doing right now if they think this could be something that could happen next year?
You should be sitting down as part of your business planning and talking to someone like me, talks and does, like I do VAT strategy sessions where we sit down and we talk through, we go through all your customers, go, right, which ones are VAT registered, which ones are not, who's it going to impact, what about those customers? If you put your price up a lot with tiny customers, what's going to happen to your customers? And we do some modeling about kind of, well, what if you lost a percentage of your customers because you have to put your prices up? Or how do you feel about absorbing the VAT for a bit? Or, you have to have those conversations, which is, financially the easiest thing to do is go, right, everybody, I'm up 20%. But actually, you might not need to. You might also find that actually some of your tiny clients, you might lose them. And you go, well, actually, if I put my prices up, that is kind of what might happen anyway. So it's having those kind of conversations and going, right, okay, well, this is what might happen, and kind of trying to model it a bit and go, well, if this happens, then this, and if this happens, and if I'm going to absorb it, I'll absorb it for a bit, or I can only afford to absorb it for 3 months, or I can, I'm going to have to put my prices up, and kind of having a bit of a plan and not just suddenly having to go, oh, I've got to put my price up tomorrow. Actually, that's the reality. 30 days, you would be giving your clients less than a month's notice. And it might be that you go, right, okay, well, I can give my clients 3 months notice that my prices are going up, to give them time to have a conversation with you about whether they still want your services, whether you are still affordable. And if not, they could change their level of service. There's all of that sort of stuff as well. And I think it's trying not, I think a lot of people end up VAT registered accidentally. And it just sort of is like, oh, I've got to do it. And suddenly you've got a month, and you probably don't realize for some of that month that you've got to register.
Yeah.
And suddenly, like, you can have 2 or 3 weeks to register, and you're like, oh no, from the 1st of next month, I've got to be charging VAT on everything.
And there's a really good point about actually the time span, because that is a real short window, that if you just accidentally have passed it, and actually some people might have in their contracts that they're not allowed to just raise their prices, and then even if you want to maintain good relationships with your clients, and you've got people that are on like a retainer basis or something like that, to be able to at least properly give people notice. Actually, I think there's a lot of people that even if they're a business that's not VAT registered, and then your prices are going up, but obviously they know it's a real reason. It's not just you being like, hey, I want to make more money. I actually think a lot of business owners would be quite supportive of that. But there is a difference between me getting an email today that says my price is going to by 20% next week, and being like, actually, I know this is happening, so in 3 months' time, I'm going to have to change. I think you actually probably increase your chances of keeping more of your clients. And that's one of the big things people worry about. They do worry about, I'm going to raise my price and lose people. So actually being prepared will help with that as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's being prepared for it. And you might find that it doesn't happen for a couple of months later than you expected, but sometimes it happens earlier than you expect. The other thing you have to remember is that actually if your clients are mostly outside of the UK, you don't have to charge VAT. But then you've got to work out how you do that on your website. There's all of that stuff, which is also a bit complicated, but it's kind of working through some of that stuff where you've got, once you're outside the UK, it's what's called out of scope, and you don't have to charge VAT on things. So it's like, well, how do you price things? Do you say everything's VAT inclusive? Do you say it's just the price is the price? There's all of that stuff. And so again, if most of your clients are outside the UK, it may not affect you that much. But I think everybody worries they'll have to put their prices up 20%, and it's actually going, right, well, that's not always the case. And I think, like you say, people worry about losing clients over it, because the trouble is, if you put your price up 20% and you lost 1 in 5 clients, it'd be kind of fine, because you'd be earning more. But of course, when you're VAT registered, that money is not coming into your pocket.
Yeah.
And I think that's often the hard bit, that people kind of go, oh, but 20% is going off to this, going off.
Well, yeah, it's like you put your prices up and you don't get a reward.
Yeah, there's no reward for it. So it's kind of, it's part of that is kind of going, that is part of what it is, that's just part and parcel of business life. But like I say, it's looking at your business plan and going, right, you need to be pushing over the 100 to then be earning more, and then you can stop worrying about the VAT threshold. It's just not a thing anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So there we go. We've got lots and lots to think about now. Is there, obviously you do these strategy sessions with people, you do all this planning all the time. Is there any just like common things that people should think about, other than like how they do, what they're going to do, their pricing, whether like that changes? Is there anything else people should be thinking about?
Not really. I mean, I think the main thing is looking at where your customers are and what sort of customers you've got, because that gives you a really clear indication. So you can look at your costs and you can kind of go, well, I've got some costs that maybe I've got some VAT on, but that's obviously a benefit. But I think the main thing is to start recording, if you don't already, whether your customers are VAT registered, where they are in the world, UK or otherwise, so that you have some idea of what that looks like. But that's kind of the main thing. I think it's kind of starting to look at particularly your customers, because that's where you're obviously going to make a big impact, and going, actually, what is the impact on my business of being VAT registered? You can also, one of the things that you can do is something called flat rate, which I don't want to go into loads of detail because it can get very complicated, but you can pick a flat rate, which is for your industry. So let's say you're a bookkeeper or an accountant, you can be like, it's like 14.5%, I think, at the moment. It changes reasonably regularly, and you can then just pay that on your sales invoices, and then you don't claim any back.
Okay.
So you can do it on a kind of flat rate basis, but again, you need to do the calculations to know, and you need to know that sort of thing exists.
Yeah.
So you can do a flat rate, or you can do kind of what they call standard rate. And then you can also decide whether you do it on a cash basis, so you pay it when you get the money, or whether you do it when you raise the invoices or receive invoices. So there are lots of kind of variations with it, and it can get very involved, and it doesn't need to. Mm-hmm. You just need to have somebody who can explain it to you in a way that you can understand. And if your accountant is talking to you in a way you don't understand, change accountants, please. Because there's a lot of accountants that talk in words that people can't understand, and they get really confused, and then they don't want to talk to their accountant. It's like, that's not, you're paying for a service that you need to understand what's going on.
So those conversations around like whether to go standard or whether to go flat rate, that's all stuff you can talk to your accountant. It's just what we're saying is sometimes your accountant might not be doing that like projection side of it. So it's easy for you to, if it's like mid-year, you might have rolled over without realizing. Yeah,
and I think it's remembering that your accountant really is looking at it from this is a numbers thing. Yeah. They produce the numbers mostly. And it's not fair to say that all of them don't, because some of them do this management reporting, but it's kind of, do you get somebody that, your accountant is doing more if they do things like every month they tell you what's going on in your accounts? Do you have somebody that tells you every month what's happening in your business? Or do you wait till 9 months after the year end when you're suddenly panicking and you're like, oh, I didn't make any money last year. What happened there? Do you know what makes you money in your business? All of those sorts of things, they are really not looking in your business. They don't, they're making sure you comply with it, and that they've got backup for all the information. You've got all the receipts for the VAT return, all of that stuff. But they're not going, well, actually, where does your business want to go in the next year, 2 years? And do you understand? Lots and lots of small businesses don't really know where they make their money, what they're really spending money on. And as you grow, that gets harder and harder to kind of manage as well, I think, because you can't be doing all things and you're starting to want to employ people or have freelancers. And it's like, well, how long can you afford You know, how long would it be that you'd be paying for somebody if you start taking on employed people? How do you make sure that you've got enough money to be able to afford them if something happened? You know, you can't make people redundant every 2 minutes. You know, freelance is a different thing, but you know, you can't be changing staff willy-nilly. Because you don't have enough money. So it's a lot of those sorts of things as people grow and they get towards that kind of 100K. I definitely think that's a time where you're kind of starting to build a team. You're starting to think about having a business rather than just a kind of freelancing gig, I think. And it's kind of going, actually, you need to step into that CEO kind of mindset and getting somebody who's a bit your right-hand person that can really help you with those numbers. And it doesn't matter who that is, but find somebody that you like and that you can ask questions of and doesn't make you feel stupid. Because I think finance is a real block for so many people, and they just never. I speak to so many people who go, "Oh, I don't understand. My accountant talks about this, and I don't really understand." And I'm like, "But you are paying for that, so get a different one."
I know.
Keep asking until you do understand. A lot of it is it can get very complicated, and there are some people who like to make it sound more complicated than it really is as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think from what you said as well, I think there's like, if you know you need those extra levels of support, it's like, go and ask if you've already got an accountant, ask the accountant, because it could be, and I've seen more and more now where it's a service an accountant offers, but it's not like it's an addition, for example, rather than being like that's their standard thing. So if you've got an accountant that you already like and like you're happy with how they do the compliance side of stuff, the first instant is talk to them and just see if that is something that they can support you with. And if that isn't, then you can look to get someone else. And then the two of them, like, you can have two right-hand people.
And I link up with bookkeepers and accountants to do exactly that, to offer that, but you know, is to offer that as a service that the accountant can offer, because they don't really offer it. But I think I think one of the things is being really clear what you are expecting of your accountant and actually what you are paying them for, because you think, oh, well, I'm paying like 1,000, 1,500 quid, whatever, what feels like quite a lot of money every year to do their compliance. It's maybe like 3 days work for the accountant once a year, even though you might be paying that all year. It feels like a lot of money for you. But if you're getting, you know, what they call the advisory stuff, it can feel that then is, you know, kind of more expensive. But it's like, but you're getting that much more regularly. You might say quarterly, actually, I want to understand my numbers. I need to know what's going on in my numbers. And if you get somebody who can talk to you about it, you know, I sit there with my clients and go, this is what your accounts look like this month. These are the things you need to be looking at. These are the worries. These are the good things. You know, do you need to be spending that? Do you know that this service that you offer doesn't make you any money? You outsource all of it. You know, there's all of that. And I think it's having a real handle, particularly while you're smaller. The smaller you start this, almost the better, because then as you grow, you've got a handle on it. I think people are very afraid, women particularly, of not knowing what they're doing, and they're worried that they don't know. And I think it holds people back.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree with that. So as I said, we've covered quite a lot of things. It'd be really nice, like, I'm doing this series, I've got one more left, and then I'm going to do a nice article to bring everything together. So I just want to ask, like, if there's only one thing that you want people to remember when it comes to like approaching that, preparing for that, all those things, what would it be?
Don't leave it until you hit the threshold. Plan, look at it and go, I can see that happening in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, and I think it's really good, because I think that rolling, I wouldn't have even thought like in terms of those 6 to 12, like, I think a lot, I didn't realize how many people would leave it till the last minute. So it's really, I think, clearly like keeping an eye on it from early on and giving yourself the time.
If you have big months, if your work is very much big month, you know, you have a really big month and you might have some small months and another big month, just be really careful that you're not tipping over the threshold by accident, because it's not nice. You don't want to have to do that quickly. You know, you can, but it's not fun.
No, that absolutely makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Sally, for coming on today. It has been lovely to talk to you. And anyone that's been watching, if you have any more comments, please do put them in the box below. I have got one more video next week where I'm going to be talking to someone who has gone through the VAT threshold, who runs a business by themselves, to talk about that experience. So be sure to watch that next week. And bye-bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Ooh.